Hi, in this video I'm going to be talking about the mechanisms and patterns of injury that are commonly seen in trauma. Now these principles will be applicable to all different parts of the body, so these are the basic sort of injuries that are seen. So to start, we can split it into two main headings. First, we have our blunt injuries, and this is any injury caused by impact to the external part of the body. So this can cause a number of problems then within the body, such as contusions and bruising on the outside, and this is small bleeding under the surface. We can have lacerations from parts of the blunt injury damaging the skin, and you can have fractures, which is where bones become damaged after force is put through them. Now, there are a number of different ways in which this can occur, but it most commonly occurs from road traffic collisions, people falling from heights, or pedestrians being hit by cars, lorries, or cyclists being hit by cars, and things like that. Next, we have our penetrating injuries. So this is where a foreign body enters the body, and this is often sort of something such as a knife, and this will cause problems by rupturing structures, including blood vessels, which will then cause bleeding. So this will often happen through stabbings, gunshot wounds, or even through blunt mechanisms of injury. And this is because bone fragments from fractures that are caused will then be sharp objects, which can cause the same injuries internally as a penetrating mechanism may cause. So fractures occur when significant force is put through a bone, and they might cause further injuries. If, for example, the broken part of the bone then goes on to penetrate a blood vessel, or it may go on to damage a nerve. So there are a number of secondary injuries that can come from fractures. And there are a number of places in which fractures can occur, and it's basically anywhere where you have bones. But they're most common in things like your limbs, and pelvic fractures are also very important to consider in trauma because there's a lot of blood vessels running through the pelvis, and this can cause significant bleeding. So bleeding is very common in trauma, and it causes the greatest number of preventable deaths. And this is because internal hemorrhage is very difficult to control. And a lot of research goes into trying to improve new ways of preventing this internal hemorrhage. And things such as Reboa, which has recently been input and trialed across a number of centres in the UK, is one of the examples of new methods of trying to prevent this hemorrhage. So another way that injuries are seen is when there's air in spaces that essentially it's not meant to be in. So normally you're meant to have air moving in and out of your lungs, but if you have an injury to one of your lungs and it bursts slightly, then this can cause air to leak out into the pleural space surrounding the lungs, and this is called a pneumothorax. This means that the lungs then have less room to expand into because there's air in the space around it, and so you're able to get less air into your lungs, so you're able to get less oxygen to your body. A pneumoperitoneum, similarly, is where you have air in your peritoneum, which is your abdomen. And this is where you have a perforation of your bowel. Again, this is common in penetrating injuries to the abdomen, and this will cause sort of rupture of the bowel and can cause infections and things like that. Brain injury behaves slightly differently to the other types of injury, and that's why we've left it till last. And this is because the brain is different to all the rest of the body, and that you have these neurons running through it, and that's its main function. And there are a number of ways in which the brain can be injured. So these include bleeding, and this can be either bleeding within the brain tissue or bleeding within the dural layers around it. And then you can have swelling, and this is where you start to get fluid buildup in the brain, and this will mean that it starts to get compressed within the skull. Or you can have bruising, which is essentially contusions and small level bleeds within the brain tissue. And then you can have direct damage to the nerves through things such as diffuse axonal injury. And this will cause the areas of brain where the nerves have been damaged to essentially start to die off. So although these might lead to similar neurological effects, because If you have a bleed in one area, it will look similar to nervous damage in one area, which will look similar to that area being compressed because of swelling. You have to work out which one's causing the problem and treat it accordingly. So those are the main types of injuries, and now the further activities will help to explain the different, more specific injuries seen in each area of the body.